Welcome back to the Lords of Lore podcast. I'm Matt,
I'm Luka.
And I'm Will.
and this is the podcast for big dumb nerds. Yeah, you heard that right. Um, that might not be our regular tagline. Last week, this was the sexy podcast for sexy nerds. What happened? Well, if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we will read the tagline you put in the description or the review that you've left, and we'll read that next week. So if you want to troll us a little bit or think we're great and want to tell us about it, that's where you can do so. But today we have a really exciting episode. We'll be combining fighters and rangers into one episode while we run through our character classes as we come up on the end of this series. We're preparing for a D&D game that we'll be playing here on the channel, hosted and ran by friend of the show, Malachi, Luka, who you know,
Yep.
Will, who you'll meet soon. Excellent DM, also just a great human being. Excited, and we'll see where it goes. Maybe we'll have more games played on this channel with Malachi. Yeah, so those are the things I think. By the time this comes out next Friday, check out our episode that Luka and I did of Ruminations, wherein Luka and I review a book. In this month, we're doing The Fires of Vengeance by Evan Winter, the follow-up to our last review, which was The Rage of Dragons, also by Evan Winter. So that's very exciting, and we probably spent the whole time gushing about it. So if you want to check that out, please do. Now let's get into it. Before we start talking about fighters and rangers, we have to get to Luka's Litany of Literature, wherein Luka has the podcast within the podcast. It tells about us some fantasy goings on of the week. Then Matt's Monster Musings, where I bring a fun creature or cryptid. And then we'll start our main topic with Will's Wondrous Wisdom, wherein Will brings some wondrous wisdom to the podcast and tells us the real world origins of the things we're talking about. So without any further ado, Luka, what's going on this week?
So to add to the litany, I've been reading two things this week. I've continued with Malazan, Reaper's Gale, book 7. And I've also been reading The Fires of Vengeance for our upcoming rumination. And as I'm coming up to the end of the Reaper's Gale, the topic I thought we would discuss is the trepidation of ending a story or book that you have really enjoyed and just almost fearing the ending will be like either disappointing or just not what you wanted to see, or just, I find myself reading slower as I get to the end of a book rather than faster, almost because I either don't want it to end or I'm worried about how it will end. And that is what happened to me this week with Reaper's Gale. Not that I'm worried that it'll be bad. It's just I'm scared to see what will happen to these people that I've come to love. And so I put Reaper's Gale down for a couple of days and only read Fires of Vengeance to sort of, collect myself before pushing through to the end of Reaper's Gale. I just want to see, what do you guys think of? Do you guys speed up when you get towards the end because you're excited to see how it'll end, or do you pull back a bit like I do?
It's an interesting question. I'm trying to figure out what my answer is. So with reading a book, I never slow down near the end because I want to know what happens, because I need the closure. I'm a pretty anxious person, so leaving things sort of up in the air I can't do it. However, that being said, as I've said many times on this show, I'm a big fan of Critical Role. I don't know how many episodes there are in the second campaign. It's 100 and something. I think around the 140s where it ended. I'm still on episode 132, and which is surprising to me, maybe not to other people who have regular lives and do, normal things. I just paint in my basement and listen to Critical Role. But it's interesting because I used to listen to it on the weekly basis, right? When I got into it, they were probably 20 episodes deep. And again, these are 4-hour long episodes. And they already had a campaign that was 150 episodes. So before, I got to a point where I caught up with both. You understand what I'm saying? That's 200 plus eventually episodes of this show that I've watched in the span of maybe 2 years, but probably less than that. So that's a lot of content.
It's a lot.
But as like, so obviously I'm no longer catching up with the old campaign.
Mhm.
I was just watching the new campaign weekly as it came out. And somewhere along, various lockdowns and stuff, my interest in it didn't wane because it wasn't entertaining anymore, but like you could feel it was getting to the end. And there was this series of events that transpired where the DM sort of went out in public and said, yeah, the campaign's wrapping up, because some people were upset about it. It's really stupid.
Mhm.
Let people run the game. They're letting you watch.
Yeah.
Don't you have no ownership over it, type of thing. But all that being said, I've sort of like, I see all like the campaign wrap up videos and like people's reactions. I've actually muted Critical Role on all my social media because I want to go into it fresh, like not
Mhm.
knowing what happens, but I don't want it to end because
Right.
it's just been such a staple. And like they're having another campaign, they're doing like a side campaign, but there's something that I just don't want it to end, so I can't bring myself to finish it. Like it's a weird thing.
Mhm.
So maybe there's some trepidation involved and mind involved, but never with books. Yeah. What about you, Will?
Uh, if anything, I'd say I'd probably speed up. I get very impatient when I read, but like my reading style is kind of strange because like I always skim the chapter and then I like determine if I should like read it or skip it.
Jeez.
Wait, you skim it and then you decide if you're going to read it?
Yeah, it's
What
like a
the
really
fuck?
bad habit that I've got. I've like
Where'd you pick
developed
that up?
just from like attending like school and stuff like that because like my
Yeah.
like workload is like 50 to 100 pages a night kind of thing. So like,
Yeah.
and it's like really bad, but that's why I like books like Game of Thrones or something like that, where it's like a different POV for each chapter instead of just like one continuous thing. Because I'll be like, oh yeah, this seems kind of slow, and then just boom, 10 pages later, I'm on the next one.
I feel actually the opposite to you with the point of view switches. In the Raven Shadow trilogy, I always talk about, there
Mhm.
are like the book has like part 1, 2, and 3, and at the beginning of each part of the book, you're taking the lens of like this historian who's like recounting it, and by the time you get to the end of the first book, you're in real time with that historian type of thing. But oh, the when I get there, that's when I'm like, I'm taking a break because like I know there's going to be a big shift coming up, and so I'm like this seems like a part where I can put it down because I don't really want to hear from this arrogant historian. I'd rather like get back to the meat of it. But yeah, I don't know. It just feels like a natural breaking point type of thing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was like easy with like an audio. I guess with a book, I would like sometimes just stop like cold in like a middle of a chapter, like at the end of a chapter, and be like, I'm picking up like 2 weeks later. In the meantime, like reading and watching other stuff. I guess with an audiobook, it's like instead of listening to, I don't know, 2 hours a day or whatever it might be, I listen to like 30 minutes on like a drive or something. Instead of like listening before bed, I read before bed or whatever it might be. So like I've just slowed down. Like I'm still pushing through it, just at a way slower pace than like the first half of it, maybe. I feel like for this one, it's not even that I'm worried about how it'll end. It's like with these books, it's always like the first half is like introducing characters, setting up what's going to happen. Then like the second half is the rising action and the climax and falling action and everything. So like now that I'm like in the meat of the ending of it, I just want to like marinate in it, you know?
Yeah. Really live in it for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
then with like
what is
Fires
your
of Vengeance,
sorry,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
No.
With like Fires of Vengeance, I was like, I had stopped early in it for no reason really. And then like I read like the maybe 70% of the book in the last like 3 days, just like
Yeah.
just, like pushed through it because it like drew me in and I just couldn't stop. Like I couldn't put it down.
That happens to me often too. I'll start a book and be like, and then all it took was like the next, like when I go back to it, it's like, oh my God, why didn't I
Yeah.
fucking finish this? Or like
Right.
shows, I often watch the first episode of something and be like, that was great.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Like
Yeah.
people like, have you seen Stranger Things? I'm like, I saw the first episode. Like, you didn't like it? And I was like, no, it's great. This is excellent. It's a great first episode. But like, I don't know. I just stopped watching it. Yeah.
See, that's why I like anthologies almost, like, as opposed to just like a linear story. Like like a lot of like I guess like myths and legends books and stuff like that. They always come in like each chapter is like a different story. So
Yeah.
like I'm like fairly scatterbrained, so like that's usually what I enjoy a little bit more. Because like I find if I'm doing like linear, I have to like sit there and like I'll try and like finish it like in a day. Because again, I think it's just because of like study habits where it's just like I want to get through
Oh,
like an
yeah.
insane amount of content, so I'll just like punish myself for like 5 hours a day. so, so like this is why like I like don't like to read at night because like if I start like reading at like 8 p.m. or something like that, like I won't put it down till like 2:30 in the morning.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
just like yeah, just like blocks of knowledge. So again, bad habits.
Also, shout out to you for finishing your degree.
Oh, thank
Congrats,
you.
man.
The wizarding degree.
Yes. Yeah, I think now that you mentioned like the POV switches in the second book of the Raven Shadow, like the first book is all from the perspective of one character, or at
Mhm.
least telling their story, and then the second book splits into three different characters, um, and like shows their journeys type of thing. Um,
Yeah.
and I felt that one was a little bit easier to read. They're both excellent, but because it was like, fuck, I want to go back to like that person's story. So now I got to like push through this one that I'm less interested in, but they're
Yeah.
all very good. So
Man,
I don't know.
that's exactly how I felt about like book 4 for Game of Thrones. Because like book 5 has like the most interesting part of the story overall, I'd say. But like book 4 is kind of like aside from like Jamie Lannister's point of view, it's kind of meh.
Yeah.
So it was like it was a
See,
filler.
if a book came like if like in Game of Thrones, like, or I think even like with Malazan, right? Like you're switching perspectives by books.
Mhm.
I think I would totally like tune out of a series if that happened. Like if it was like, okay, book one's from this person's perspective, book two's from a different person. If I wasn't like immediately drawn into the second person, I might put it down for like a month and be like, okay, I'll go back now. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
tough sell.
Yeah, I think book 5 of Game of Thrones had like 20 something point of views like going on. I mean, like
Yeah.
some of them are like minor characters, but I digress.
Well, cool.
Anyway, yeah, that will do it for my thoughts on this week. I have not finished book 7, so that'll become next week.
Okay, right on. Let's jump into Matt's Monster Musings. We're gonna switch up the way I do this. We'll see if this works in this episode. If not, we'll never see it again. So I want you guys to imagine I'm your dungeon master. Okay.
Easy.
Yes,
Um,
master.
think of a character
Oh,
right now. You have 5 seconds.
say it
Okay,
out
Luca, what
louder.
are you?
I'm a rogue.
Okay, human,
Elf
elf.
for
Okay,
sure.
Will, what are you?
Probably a half elf fighter.
Half elf fighter and elf rogue. Okay. You guys work for this heroes for hire type of mercenary work. The king has hired you to go and reclaim the hopefully destroyed vessels, shipping vessels of people who have been smuggling things in to his land. Okay. They led them into the rocky cliffs and then lost track of them where the storm raged, and their ship should be destroyed on the shore. So you've been sent to reclaim them, and any survivors you've been dispatched to deal with. Okay, that's our scenario. Um, so you make your way down this rocky coastline, and in the distance you can see some wrecked ships on the side of on the shore. And as you approach, you can see things that are floating down, mostly broken pieces of wood and crates. You see like some spoiled food floating down in your direction. But then you see cow hides floating on top, pretty large, about 6 feet across. It seems to be floating in your direction. What do you do?
Talking about like the hide of a cow or like this a skinned living cow.
Like the hide of a cow.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hmm.
Like they're just like floating there.
I
Just
don't know that
floating.
I'd do anything about that. I'd probably just
Is it like a feel like it's a trap?
the
Could
floating
be.
cowhides feel like a trap.
I don't know. Maybe. Why are the cowhides in the water?
Would you like to find out?
Yes.
I would honestly in that situation, like in an actual D&D game, I think I would just disregard that and just keep moving.
Great.
Yeah. I don't know.
Oh,
I was
awesome
kind of
DM, by
expecting
the way.
like something a little bit more intense.
Okay, so yeah, we'll never see this. So let's say you're drawn to the cowhides by a great description by a better DM than I.
Do like something written on the cowhides or something like.
No.
Are they like brand new, like fresh?
Okay, so maybe if I was actually DMing this, I'd say there are no cows in these lands. So this is the first time you've seen something like this.
Is it like a
Oh.
sea cow?
What?
I don't know.
Well, then I would go investigate.
Okay, cool. Thanks for
Cautiously.
playing along.
You'll probably keep walking. But
The cowhide comes to life in front of you with a long, barbed tail, its mouth filled with claws on the inside, and it attacks you. Okay. Thanks.
This is
So-
why you never investigate anything.
Exactly. This has been a public service announcement for all D&D players out there. Never investigate anything. Because if I'm DMing, it's a trap. Or it was very helpful and I've made you think it was a trap. I hate player success. We are talking this week about El Cuero, or translates to the hide or the leather. What is El Cuero? Well, it resembles a primitive stingray at most. That's where the floating cowhide is. But on the other side, the flip side of this cowhide is a large mouth, and it doesn't have teeth on the inside. It has claws, like sharp claws. I don't know why that's the description. You could call them teeth, but apparently they're claws. That's important. So the El Cuero is something from South America, and I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, but who cares at this point? Again, it's said to be like this floating cowhide that comes to life and eats your children. So, South American mothers would warn their children from going into the lakes or rivers because El Cuero is there and will eat them. This thing, it could also be called a hueque, huek, Hueke, Hueke. I don't know what that is. This one more resembles an actual stingray. And stingray are found obviously in South America. You also get like the long-tailed and short-tailed stingrays, which we know tragically Steve Irwin passed by stingray because stingray have these barbed tails that are venomous, and the way they're shaped naturally is like a fine blade with serrated edges, and it even has I think it's called a fuller on the sword, the little groove that goes down the middle, making it a more deadly piercing weapon. But obviously stingrays have this in the venom. Sometimes they're called wish you were dead fish because if you get hit with one of these in the legs or the arm, your arm will like pus up and it's very painful. It causes lifelong nerve damage just because of the necrosis it causes. But the El Cuero isn't attributed with one of these tails. It's just its bite can do this. There's a famous or infamous story rather of a woman saying she was washing her clothes in the lake and her baby was on the shore nearby, and El Cuero came up, snatched the baby, and was gone as quick as it had come. Which that's up to speculation, but again, it is like a wives' tale. Stay away from the waters. El Cuero will get you. But stingrays do also have like similar to cows, like that brown sort of color, but also stingrays have like this cool patterning that almost looks like when water's shining down through something, you get like those ripple sort of, I don't know what they're actually called, but yeah, they have that sort of on so that they camouflage. They're very creepy things. If you'd like, you can check out the episode of River Monsters on stingrays.
I knew it. I knew that's where you got it from. The first thing I was going to say was, did you get this from River Monsters?
I've been trying to convince Will to watch fucking River Monsters for fucking years. It's the best show.
It is a great show.
Yeah, there's an episode where he actually catches one of these things, and it is freaky. So yeah, that's El Quiero. Last week we did what did we do last week? Wasn't the Sphinx? It was um the Morkoth, the Tamatoa. So both sea creatures. Obviously, one is intelligent. The El Quiero is not very intelligent, just a beast. But which one would you rather encounter?
I would have to say El Quiero.
Yeah, I mean, just especially like on the grounds of like it not being sentient.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, well, to the degree as
Yeah,
the other creature, because I feel like that would be like if it's just like a natural animal. I mean, just, just take our advice and don't investigate.
yeah, yeah. Okay. So that'll do for a PSA on how to play D&D. Never engage, or if you're a DM, make
Just
better
be very bland.
descriptions of things. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely El Quiero.
Also, in the wreck ships was a bomb because fuck you guys. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into our main topic, starting off with Will's Wondrous Wisdom. What do you got for us?
Fighters and Rangers is the topic.
Oh,
Man, we talked about this earlier, and I just like hate the fighter class of D&D.
you're wrong.
Just like, yeah,
Hey, hey, this guy doesn't like fighters. Get a load of this guy. What a goof.
just alt-right paladins only. I mean, like, well, yeah. Before we start, I guess define the difference in D&D terms between the class of fighters and rangers.
Define the difference in D&D terms. Well, the ranger has similar proficiencies to the fighter in that they're trained in martial weapons and ranged weapons. The difference is, though, the ranger gets access to druidic spells and also has the ability to tame beasts and have a companion. Anyone can tame beasts in D&D, but and have a companion basically. But the companion is sort of the beast companion is built into the ranger class.
Like they can like talk to it and stuff.
Well, you could take that as one of your spells, but they can control it essentially. So it can
Yeah,
it gets its own actions.
I'll be honest, like I'm kind of like unfamiliar with the ranger of D&D. I guess the intricacies. I couldn't find my 5th edition handbook anywhere. So
Yeah, no worries.
I'm
No,
moving right now.
it's actually a much maligned class, and I think that's why we put it together here, because the Rangers in 5th edition are like there's 100 articles you can find out there and make the Ranger better in 5th edition, and they're all pretty justified in my readings. The Ranger is, I wouldn't say subpar, but it's lackluster. There's nothing about it that you couldn't map onto a fighter, besides like the druidic spells, which you're like a half caster if you play a ranger in 5th edition, and so you only get a certain amount of spells, and it takes you longer to learn them than other people with those spells. So I don't know. It's a tough sell. It's basically the druid's counterpart to the Eldritch Knight, basically.
Yeah, and like that's the other thing, because like my understanding, because I've never actually played as a fighter in D&D for this reason, is that it's just anyone who can hold a sword and doesn't use, or mostly doesn't use magic, or I guess to a certain degree.
Well, so a ranger does, right? And a fighter can, depending on their subclass. I'm less familiar with the ranger subclasses. I know there's like Monster Hunter, Beastmaster, Gloom Stalker, Horizon Walker, all, but it's mostly just where you came from type of thing.
Yeah, and because like, I correct me if I'm wrong, but like fighter subclasses is like Battle Master, and then Eldritch Knight, right?
So there's a lot, like if you're looking at like base, like player's handbook,
Yeah,
I
that's what I've
think
been
it's
like using thus far.
yeah. So there's a lot more like based off like
It
the subsequent material they've pumped out, and
could
they're
be
really
any
cool.
adventure you want.
Yes. And obviously you can make your own subclass and stuff like that. But for fighters, yeah, you're right. It's champion, um, which just makes you like okay, so like a fighter champion is what you give someone who's like, I want to hang out with you guys, but I don't really know if I want to play yet. Like I don't know. You give them a fighter champion, it's just like you just roll dice, you just play the game. You don't have to worry about anything else. Um, then there's the battle master, which is like you are so well trained that you know how to disarm somebody or parry somebody, or your strategic knowledge makes it easier for your allies to be effective in combat. Then obviously the Eldritch Knight is you have wizard training, similar to the Ranger. Instead of druidic magic, you have arcane magic. So like I'd say like the Paladin, the Ranger, and the Eldritch Knight are all fighters with some sort of magic, whether it's druidic, arcane, or divine. Um, they're just sort of different variations of the same thing with just a little bit of different flavor.
Mhm.
But then there's also like the samurai subclass. There's the Echo Knight, which is fucking heady as shit and super cool. Yeah, there's a bunch of cool. There's like the drunken, the way of no, maybe that's a monk.
Yeah, that's definitely monk. But
Yeah, but there's a bunch of cool ones.
yeah, so I mean, to sum it all up, just fighter is just super very like a very very like wide net of like of like available characters. Um, I mean, like specializations aside, it's just like how you said with like the champion, it's just who just pick up sword and play. Um, which is also like why I had like a nightmare with looking into like the historical background because it's like literally like every hero
Yeah,
from,
yeah. Just the
from
history of war. Yeah.
yeah, like pretty much like I think the ones that like definitely come to mind. See, like when I think of fighter, I think of like a gladiator. Um, because like I remember like when I first got like the fifth edition handbook, I was like, fighter sounds cool. Like I thought it was just like, like a pit fighter, but like when I got to like the actual chapter or like the pages with all the information, I was like, man, like this just like deflated me. Um,
Oh,
this hence why I chose paladin. Um,
oh, I think that's just wrong.
um, but yeah, I mean like pit fighter, hence my background, the fighting pits of Marine from um, the Game of Thrones. But I mean like historical, like I guess like my favorite fighters would have to be like probably like I'm sure we've all heard of the Iliad, right? So like Achilles, but one of the, like the other heroes that I like is Diomedes. He's definitely like one of like the coolest characters because when Achilles and Agamemnon are having their dispute and he's not showing up, like Diomedes just like rolls up and he's like more or less like one of the only ones who doesn't really have like a divine background. So like he's just like pretty much like a regular guy, but he just like goes on like a massive tear like in the story. Like he basically has like two chapters where he just like pretty much takes on like the entirety of like the Trojan army, and I think he like stabs. Um, I can't think
Hercules.
of her name right now. The Aphrodite.
Ah,
Yeah, because he just like
right.
he basically goes on like this tear and just like kills like hundreds of people just like by himself, and he's just having like a good time, and like everyone's shocked because he's just like a regular human. Like there's no like he's not like a demigod or anything, and just like generic sword and shield guy, and then like one of like the Greek gods intervenes, and I think there's like someone else, but Aphrodite rolls up and they're like, "Can you stop?" And then he's just like, "Nah." So he's like slashes her leg or something like that, or shanks her. I don't know. Like it was just like kind of cool because like in a story of like so much, like all these like demigods and divine influences, you just have like a regular human. So like to when I think of like a oh, where'd you go? Yeah, I think of like a generic fighter. That's who comes to mind from like it's like historical real world lore. But
Yeah.
I mean, just pretty much anyone in history who used a sword or similar weapon. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair description. I can see why you'd say like fighter is like this the umbrella of which things fall under. A fighter is too big. I I sort of agree, but I just think maybe fighter is just a dumb name. Like
Yeah,
all
I think
classes are technically fighters. They're
it
all
should have
fighting
been
things.
warrior.
It should have been. I don't but then you could say the same thing. Like a ranger could be a warrior too, you know. I think fighter's a silly name, but I don't know what else you would call it, which wouldn't yeah, maybe the umbrella is too big, but um I don't know. See, like when you say I want to be a pit fighter in D&D, I would never default to paladin. I like paladin to me is like a very specific.
Like like my usual class that I always roll like in any form of
Yeah.
like RPG is usually like a knight. So,
See,
uh,
I also like knight that has access to magic. Like, so that's what I play in most things. But I would never want to only have that magic because I serve a god, unless it's like a warlock. Then it's like there's some role play you can involve there. But like you can do the same thing with paladin. I know I'm super dismissive of paladins, but like I just like I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a big religion guy. I just like
all
I
right,
don't know.
paladins for life.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, Luca, what would you because we're mostly touching on fighter here, but like
Mhm.
what would you say like about like the difference between the two for you?
Um, I mean, for me, Ranger is um, tracking ability, scouting ability. The animal companion tends to be more of a ranged fighter. I mean, I know fighters can be like ranged fighters, but just like my default is like when I hear Ranger, I think like with a bow and like a hawk on his shoulder or something,
Yeah.
like that sort of aesthetic. And then a fighter would have heavier armor, metal armor instead of leather for a ranger. Um, fighter is like if you like a tank versus archer sort of. Since both of them can have like magical subclasses, the magic isn't really what sort of differentiates them. Yeah, for me, it's more like almost pretty much like the range versus like a fighter would be in an army and a ranger would be a scout in an army.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
and like what comes to mind actually, in Oblivion, like Elder Scrolls 4, there's like because you have like your regular like city watch guards, and then you have like the Imperial Army soldiers, but then there's also the Imperial Foresters, which I always thought was like kind of cool. Um, so like they're like the ones who like police like the forests and stuff like that. So like you could be like in the middle of nowhere, like in some like forest in Oblivion, and then like you'll just like some guy will just like run up and he'll be like, "What are you doing?" And and he's just like, yeah, he's just like a scout ranger version of like the city watch, which I thought was
Yeah.
kind of cool because like you don't really see that kind of stuff, even though like in reality you'd have like I guess like those kinds of scouts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the ranger would be more nature oriented, more maybe not nature, but like outdoorsy type, like
Mhm.
you'd find a ranger in a forest or on a scouting mission. You'd find a fighter in a city, in an army, um, in a campaign of some kind, rather than like looking for enemies in the trees or whatever. Like,
Yeah, like I don't know, like D&D Rangers, just like I feel like, um, especially after we just covered druids, it's almost like they would like naturally progress into being a druid as they get older. Like
Yeah.
were I to be like writing like a fantasy story, that's like what I would do with those classes. Could be like, yeah, when I was younger, I was like a ranger, but like now I just hang out.
I like that. Yeah. Also like the druid's apprentice. Like I
Mhm.
came to the forest to learn from this druid and
Like
now
I
I
was
know
a
these
fighter, but
powers.
then I wanted to
yeah,
become
Yeah.
a druid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I moved to a different part of the forest and I protect humanity from the dangers of the forest type of thing.
Mhm.
Um so I don't think rangers are less interesting or less cool than fighters. I just think you get less to work with you're sort of bound by these abilities that like only matter if your DM says they matter. Whereas I think like a fighter,
Could
the
just do the
abilities you
ranger.
get are like crazy powerful, like action surge. You can take a whole nother turn during combat. Even like the maneuvers, your influence, but the ranger's just sort of like, yeah, if your DM puts you in the forest, you could find your way, or you can
Mhm.
find food.
Yeah.
You really hate orcs or whatever enemy you choose, but I don't know. It's just less appeal to me. And I think most of the characters I would map my ranger on, I could just as easily make them a fighter and say, yeah, this was my background,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and still get that flavor in there.
I mean, it almost feels like ranger could even be like a fighter subclass. Like,
Yeah.
And I
Because
think
I don't
that's
think the ranger subclasses are. Sorry, well, go ahead.
oh yeah, and like I think that's kind of like why I don't really like I didn't really like the whole like range or the fighter class because like in most or in most like RPGs and stuff like that that I've come into contact with have always been like this is your class. Like for example, like Dragon Age where it's like very strict
Yeah.
and like specialized where and then like fighters just like oh you don't really
But like
use
fighters a
magic.
class in Dragon Age.
mhm.
Yeah, but you get like the two very like specific and like you're restricted to like sword and shield or like two hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like and aside from like being like the main character who gets like the Inquisitor powers like in Dragon Age 4, like that's pretty much it. So I don't know, but
Yeah.
then just to learn that it's like so wide, I was like, man, I guess I'll be a paladin.
No, yeah. See, I find the paladin too narrow, and even though I admit the fighter might be too wide, I think there's obviously if it's more wide, there's more room to play in there. And like a lot of the ideas I have for characters, I'm like, how do I make this into a fighter? And if I can't, then I'll go to other classes because I mean I enjoy playing. The character I've played the most was a fighter, and then I multi-classed into warlock because I wanted that sort of flavor. That character would never work as a ranger, like at
Mhm.
all. There's no way.
Yeah.
Or a paladin, like too strict and like didn't do enough of what I thought was cool. Um,
Mhm.
but I mean, you could also be a ranged combat fighter. There's even a subclass like arcane archer. You're imbuing your arrows with magical powers and stuff. Um, just like absolute snipe show. So yeah, I like. There's nothing the ranger does that besides having the beast companion that appeals to me on any level more so than the fighter does.
Mhm.
Mhm. So I guess let's get into our favorite fighters and or rangers.
Okay, so I think what's cool too is we should, when people bring examples, we should define whether the rest of us think they're fighters or rangers.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah,
Sounds
we'll
good.
start with you, Luca. Go ahead.
All right. You want me to just list off a couple examples that I brought?
Yeah,
And we
sure.
can. Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, Tau Solaren.
Yes, on my list as well.
Yes.
And so you're saying fighter or ranger?
To me, he's a fighter.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Will hasn't read Aragon. Aragon.
Let's just explain for Tau
Oh,
Solar,
yes.
and I think this might be something that comes up a couple more times. Once for sure on my list. Anybody who exists in the world where people predominantly use one hand or like one sword to fight, and they have two, fighter. Absolutely every time. Like Kratos being maybe the exception, in that you could probably put him in barbarian,
Mhm.
but I think maybe the first three God of War games, absolutely fighter.
Yeah.
Maybe warlock-ish, but he is the god, so he's not getting whatever. This is not about Kratos, but yeah, Tau Solar and just absolute. Uh, maybe like warlock energy a bit because he's pulling power from the world of the dead or
Yeah,
whatever.
but he doesn't pull power. I mean, I haven't finished. I don't know if he does at the end of book 2, but up until now, he's not pulling power into his world from another source.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a fair criticism. He's getting his power there through training. He's
Yeah.
just training more than other people do because he can manipulate time by going there. Yeah. No, I would say fighter then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
He's a dual wielding fighter.
Yeah.
Then we got Aragon. Aragon is he's like, I mean,
he's called a ranger.
Yeah, he's literally called a ranger but if we're using the D&D-esque definitions, he's more of a fighter, honestly. Like, I don't know which subclass he would be, but like he's like a fighter with the knowledge of the natural world that a ranger might have, you know?
Yeah, I'd say he's like a fighter with the outcast background.
Yeah.
Like he definitely has knowledge of the world and of nature, but he doesn't use any magic that would put him into the ranger class for me. So
Mhm.
I would say he's a fighter. Yeah.
And the way he fights, like two-handed sword, like to
Yeah.
me, he's a fighter.
Two-handed sword, throws daggers, and can use a bow. That's a
Yeah.
fighter. Yeah.
I got Legolas on my list too. Legolas is also a fighter to me.
I would say, yep.
He is a ranged fighter.
I have no complaints with either of those being.
I have two examples from Stormlight Archives, which you guys have not read. The main character, Kaladin, and
Ranger for sure.
I mean, Kaladin was a spear wielding fighter. Like at this point in the story, he is no longer a pure fighter. He would be maybe a warlock. Dalinar Kholin, however, is a pure fighter. He is a war leader and a general. And I got Sokka from The Last Airbender.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Sokka is a fighter.
But definitely.
But he does have some characteristics. He has Animal Companion for a couple episodes. He's got that
hockey
Fire Nation bird. He's a fighter.
So the Animal Companion, definitely you could slide him into a ranger, but he doesn't have that knowledge that I think comes with it. And obviously, there's that episode where he's like, I'm just a guy with a boomerang. And so he goes and learns how to be like a better fighter and learns like how to use a sword. Yeah. Really cool arc. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he masters all four fighting styles of the four nations.
Oh. Well, what?
Air,
Air.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I didn't even realize that. That's sick.
And I have two more. I got Jin Sakai from The Ghost of Tsushima. he's a fighter.
Yeah. I would put all samurai into fighter.
Yeah, he is a fighter.
Go ahead. Yeah, because like I was gonna say that, but I was like, if we weren't using D&D terms, I would argue ranger. Like solely because like he's like definitely in a woods the whole time, most of the time.
True.
He has like animal friends, aka the foxes that you can find around.
Also true.
Hang out. I mean, you can pet them. Definitely animal companions, as well as the birds that you can like follow.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah, and I mean like in my playthrough, he was definitely like very much like kind of like Aragorn, like in Lord of the Rings, like how I use them, because like I never used like armor and stuff like that. So, but we're using D&D, definitely a fighter.
Yeah, fighter. And then I got Zoro from One Piece, who is also a fighter. He is also a samurai-esque, using the 3-sword style.
Nice.
What about you guys?
Okay, so my list starts with Geralt.
Okay.
And now I'm a little bit conflicted.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously like Rune Knight is a subclass of a fighter, which is what Geralt does. There's also Eldritch Knight, which you can sort of flavor to be, the what are they called? Augury. The signs the Witcher uses. Yeah, just signs. Okay. So yeah. So I would, if I was wanting to play Geralt, I would make him a fighter, Eldritch Knight, or I don't know, a Rune Knight maybe. But you could make an argument for Ranger because he's a monster hunter, outcast, sticks to himself and knows a lot about things, and also has access to magic. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, honestly, like using just the pure D&D definitions, like he'd almost fall under Ranger more, because like all of his skills are very nature-based, monster hunting based.
Yeah, well, I mean, like he pulls power from elements, right? Like when you find like the element stones.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
or at least like in the game, I should say, for Witcher 3
Yeah.
specifically. And he
But
also
like his signs aren't really like they're minor magic, even in the world of The Witcher. Like it's very like small scale.
Right. Which I think would work in line with like an Eldritch Knight or a Ranger, in that like you're a half caster. It's not your main thing. You hit people with things. But we don't ever see him use ranged weapons, do we? No, he's got a
crossbow in the game at least, but it's not.
I think that's good. I'm willing to say Geralt's a ranger. I would.
Yeah, I wouldn't be mad at that. I mean, I wouldn't play him as a ranger in D&D though. So.
Me neither. But you could. I guess is the takeaway here. Then I put Link from the Zelda games. I would almost just say he's a fighter. Trained in all martial weapons. You find a hammer, a giant fucking hammer, you can use it. He's sword and shield guy. Also uses a bow, boomerang, fucking slingshot, you name it.
Yeah, he's a fighter.
I would say he's a fighter. I put the Hound from Game of Thrones. Fighter.
Definitely.
I also had Legolas and Aragorn on my list, but I think they're both fighters. Get into some Marvel examples. Captain America, fighter.
Yes.
Everyone's a fighter, man.
I'd say Black Widow's a fighter, but maybe a rogue as well.
Yeah.
And there's some crossover between rogue and fighter too. Black Panther, maybe a monk, but could also just be like an unarmed fighter.
Yeah.
I put One Punch Man because I thought it was funny. Being like someone who just like willed himself to be good at fighting so good that Robin Hood, I would put as ranger.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
There's no magic, but I think all the things you're saying before will like, knowledge of the land and stuff and being an outsider. But I wouldn't say he's not a fighter. You could play him as a fighter for sure. Sockeye had as well. I also had Jin Sakai. Now my background for people who may not be able to see is Aincrad or Ainclad. I can't remember from Sword Art Online. And so I'm going to highlight Kirito, who also fits that description of in a world full of one-handed sword users, he double wields. And why I think it's such a great example, because I'd say everybody in the world of Sword Art Online, not the show, but the specific game within the show, they all fit into fighter because that's what the game is. You're all fighters. Some people I think can use a little bit of magic in Sword Art Online, if I'm remembering correctly. For sure in Alfheim Online, but in Sword Art Online, I think there might be something. But your abilities in that game are all sword skills. So they're all battle master maneuvers, right? But he is so good and so quick at what he does specifically. He's the one person in the game, because it's an anime, he's the one person in the game that has the ability to dual wield. And when you first like see him do it, it's so sick.
Agreed.
Yeah. Definitely fits into that category. Just like the will to be the best possible at this one specific thing is definitely fighter-esque. Rock Lee from Naruto. Like you could play Rock Lee as a monk for sure, no questions asked. But I think he has the energy of a fighter, and that I don't do all that other shit. I just hit people, And then my last one on my fighter list was Tau Solarin. Rangers. We talked last week about Briarhearts from Skyrim. We said they were like druids. I think maybe not. I think the Forsworn caster people, those are the druids. Briarhearts are the rangers, in that their power comes from druidic magic, but they don't utilize that magic to attack. So I'd say a Briarheart might fit into, like, I would say like maybe a Briarheart's not a ranger specifically, but I'd say a Briarheart is great inspiration if you want to play a ranger. Maybe like you were stolen by evil druids and they switched out your heart with a taproot, and then you escaped, and now this is your life. Like you're just very in tune with nature. Something like that. Weird one. Jurassic World, the character Chris Pratt plays, Owen, definitely a ranger. Obviously there's no magic, but like definitely like his ability is not his ability to fight. That's not like, you can't fight a fucking dinosaur. His ability is just knowing how they work and nature around them. So I think it's good inspiration. Maybe he doesn't fit into that class specifically, but I put Scotty from Norse mythology in that she has obviously a giant wolf companion. For that reason as well, I put Princess Mononoke. Again, no magic, but her having those animal companions is what makes her like a very scary threat. Buffy Summers from Buffy the Vampire Slayer show I'm not that familiar with, but I think a lot of vampire hunters, if they don't fall into Blood Hunter, they would fall into Ranger, in that you get your favorite enemy. So you'd put vampire in there. Favorite terrain you might choose an urban setting, or wherever that vampire might be. And then your tracking abilities would all be sort of in tune or in line with tracking vampires and stuff like that. So I think if you want to play a vampire hunter, fighter's fine, but I think Ranger might be more mechanical to fit that flavor. Asha from Rise of the Ranger, the Echoes of, I think it's just called the Echoes series by Philip C. Quintrell. Really awesome. I talked about it before on the show. It's the Ranger who like warps through time. Like he runs and he's certain suddenly like 1,000 years in the future, and then 40 years passes. Yeah, but he's part of the like monster hunting fraternity type of thing, which is really cool. Driz Do'Urden, an actual example from D&D. He's a Drow Ranger who has like a panther as his animal companion. He's super cool. Another Naruto example, Kiba, sort of definitely just takes inspiration from Princess Mononoke with like the face tattoos, but also has a dog that transforms into a bigger dog. Also, I can't remember his name, but the fucking guy who controls bugs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like he infuses bugs with chakra to do his bidding. Maybe more of a druid, but I didn't mention him last week. Yeah, Ash from Pokemon. Ranger.
True. Yeah.
His whole thing is getting more animal companions and learning about them. Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon, which I initially said was a barbarian.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of pushback, and you guys are absolutely right. He's definitely a ranger. Ace Ventura, just for shits and gigs. Maybe no magic, obviously. You could say the same with Hiccup. I'd say Ash probably has magic from his animal companions. And then from Inuyasha, last one is Sango, who has Kirara, the sort of the cat that also transforms into a bigger thing.
Yeah,
that's like a theme in animes. I like that. Yeah. So, would you guys flip any of those? I know I just listed off the fucking 85, but did any of you strike you as not in the right category?
No, I thought Ash was a hilarious addition.
Nice.
Ash the Ranger, the 10-year-old Ranger.
Yeah, I think it'd be funny if someone like tried to play, like you probably have more success with it, like playing a druid class and like your conjure animals ability, but someone trying to be Ash, like you just have like, I don't know, some magical items that lets you catch like a fucking displacer beast or something. Yeah. What about you, Will?
I mean, like pretty much all of my selections that I can make are all fighters, but actually I do really like how you mentioned like a vampire. God, sorry, I almost knocked my laptop off the table. Like I like how you mentioned like a ranger or like a vampire hunter being like a ranger, or I guess like even like a Van Helsing type, which I kind of like, because I'm not sure if you remember, but like around like December last year, I was like super into Bloodborne. So like, and like I like started making like my own character and stuff like that, like as like a hunter class, which I definitely like, but like I think were I to make a character in the near future, I'd probably do like a ranger hunter type class.
Yeah.
Because like I fucking love Bloodborne, so just like everything about it. But like I would say like my character that I've made in Bloodborne is definitely a fighter. Because like I don't use like any form of like magic or anything like that. It's just my chain whip thing.
Kinky.
So yeah, man, speed dex all day.
You'd make
I guess
a
I
found
mean
lover.
No.
Found
mean-
lover.
No.
Speed, dick, and whips. Sorry, you were saying?
Big dick and whip.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Fuck.
Did I make you lose your train of thought?
Kind of, yeah.
What happened?
I mean, like speaking of dicks, like I guess like a good example of a fighter would be Strong Belwas, who's actually a eunuch, so he's lacking.
I see how you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Segued there.
He ain't got no pig penis, but like he's definitely like he's like a former pit fighter. He becomes like a part of like Daenerys's Queen's Guard.
Oh, is he unsullied?
No, he's just
Oh.
like a eunuch who basically became like super popular in the Marine pit fights. Hence why I have my background. Hence my pit fighter. I guess like what I was like drawn towards.
Right.
Yeah, so he's like in the books, he's not shown in the show, which is like I was kind of disappointed. But he actually like arrives with Barristan Selmy, like and actually like their background together is like they meet and like become like traveling companions. But like in order for like Barristan Selmy to like keep himself disguised, he actually like pretends to be his like Belwas's squire.
Ah.
So they're like, man, this guy's like the oldest squire on the planet. He's like in his 60s and he's still a squire. Like, what the hell? And so it's kind of like their like weird thing that they have going on. But he's like, yeah. So like Belwas is just like this. He's like super tall, just a big dude, like sword shield kind of guy. His like signature is that he always lets his opponents like cut him once because like that's how he like get the crowd going. Like when he was a pit fighter. So like he would like put on a show, so he would like intentionally put himself like in harm's way. So like they would like slash him or something like that. And then he would just like go on the offensive and just like kill him instantly or like when he wanted to. So he's kind of like a boxer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think he's definitely like one of the cooler pit fighters. I guess that'll be my subclass as a pit fighter.
Yeah, you could definitely play a pit fighter as a battle master. You
Yeah.
just have a spear and you're super good at fucking controlling the battlefield.
Mhm.
Yeah, celebrity pit
But
fights.
I don't think like with the paladin class, I don't think it translates good to a pit fighter. Like I don't know. It could though. Like I think I have fucking the worst bias against paladins I'm discovering.
Man.
Which makes me sad because now I think I'm going to be forced to play one in our game, and I don't want to.
Actually, as a side note, if you want to jump into 40K quickly, so there's like a group of like human like space marines. They're called the Grey Knights, which are like space paladins, like they're
Yeah.
demon hunters. But like one of their characters that's named actually becomes a pit fighter at one point. So yeah, because he gets like captured and sent to like a
Right.
demon world, and he goes from paladin to being a pit fighter because he like take away his armor and stuff. So it is possible.
You got Uno reversed.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no.
That's all I got, man.
Yeah, I think both of those are rangers and you're wrong. But no, just kidding. I think all the unsullied too would definitely fit into fighter, just
Mhm.
trained soldiers. Like
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. So okay, for me, here I just discovered it when you were talking. Paladin could just be a fighter who believes in some sort of god, and that's all. That's as far as I would take my religion in a game. I think, like, I don't know, like
It's
any.
not. They
What?
get real power.
I know, but like, would you
I
rather have
know.
smite or like action surge? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean action surge, but
yeah. And like, if you take action surge and then you multi-class or you play Eldritch Knight, your second action could be a spell. Paladins can't do that; they get one. You know,
true.
which I mean, that's metagaming and fucking what's called like power gaming or whatever.
Crunch.
which some people are not into, but fuck it, I want to hit things, cast spells, hit things. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously we all agree this character is important in fantasy, being a fighter, because they make up the armies that are usually, present in fantasy. Let's talk about rangers. What do you guys think? Like, what makes the ranger important to fantasy, or is it at all? What do you think, Luka?
I mean, again, for me, like ranger is almost a subclass of fighter, especially in the wider world of fantasy, like beyond D&D.
Yeah.
So I think like I don't think any like fantasy work really distinguishes very deeply between, like, even in like most fighters we have like heavy infantry, cavalry, rangers, and then just normal infantry. Essentially, like they're all pretty much like under the same umbrella of fighter. So I don't know that rangers, it's like it's hard to say it's less or more important than fighter. Like they're always grouped together. That's why we did it like this anyway.
Yeah.
Like rarely do you have the like ranger class where you get like druidic magic in the wider works of fantasy.
Right.
So I would say as important as the fighter, because every army needs scouts. Every army needs archers. So in terms of importance of fantasy, as important as fighter.
Okay. Will? I don't think there's anything wrong with
that. No. So like I went to go like search up like how like I mentioned earlier, like the Oblivion, like the Imperial Forester.
Yeah, okay.
So like I went to go search it up, but I didn't realize that I had like Hinge open, so I just like messaged
this girl. You just messaged her Oblivion.
Like Oblivion Imperial. I had to unmatch, but hopefully she didn't see it. I like Rangers. Definitely like I like were I to play one, it would be like one that is like an explorer type, or like the hunt, or like a beast hunter kind of thing.
Well, yeah, let's get into it then. If you guys were going to play a ranger, what would you play? You said like what type of things would you want to hunt?
I mean, like definitely like vampires, like demons, that kind of stuff. So like there's like a character in Warhammer 40K. He's one of the Primarchs. His name is Lionel Johnson, which is a play on words of the poet. But his his background was that like he crash landed on this world, and he basically like grew up like in the feral forests of like this one like planet, and like his like thing was that he would like hunt like all these like dark beasts, which are just another word for like chaos demons. Yeah. And then he like eventually like joins like the society like on the planet after he gets like after like a group finds him and like raises him and stuff. But they're all just like knights who just like happen to hunt I guess like these like chaos demons. But like prior to him like becoming like a knight, like he was basically just like going off in the woods to kill some creatures, which I guess like that's how I play. Or like someone who's like a guide for like a dark forest would be like kind of cool to do in a campaign.
Yeah. What about you, Luka?
If I was choosing ranger, again, like the hunting aspect of the ranger is the most interesting to me, like the coolest. So yeah, probably a monster hunter. It's like I want to say Geralt because I love Geralt so much, but I don't see him as a D&D ranger. So maybe like if I was a ranger, I'd want to be like maybe the outcast background. That'd be cool. Having lived in the forest from a young age, raised by wolves or something like that. Ooh. Like raised by some kind of creatures. So you're like, I think a ranger without what would that be, like social assimilation maybe, or social without social skills.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely charisma dump stat for playing a ranger. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd probably do something similar. like the Monster Hunter is obviously the coolest because especially when you're playing D&D, it's like it's what you're doing.
Yeah.
Fighting monsters. But I also think like you show up to like the big city and you need someone who's got a lay of the land type of thing. It's usually like a scheming thief or ranger. I think it'd be cool to like subvert that and go with like this. Sorry, did I say ranger? I meant fucking rogue.
Yeah.
I think it'd be cool to be a ranger in that situation of just like a mercenary who knows everything very well and is hunting something within the city, whether that's, there's a group doing nefarious things or maybe there's like some cult worshiping like the dragon gods or something. Or even like, vampires, right?
Like basically the player character in Bloodborne, because it mostly takes place in a city.
Yes, exactly.
Then you're called a hunter. So
nice. Yeah, something like that. I think more like I saw when I was doing some research, like you could say Altair definitely rogue, right? What's the Ezio Dottore, right? Definitely probably a rogue, but Connor Kenway, a little bit of a ranger, I think. Definitely more of that game than any of the other ones prior to. Takes place in in nature more so. I mean, obviously he has like the dexterity based combat, like he's an assassin, but he's swinging a hatchet, he's skinning animals and hunting. He can steer a boat. Yeah, I think Connor might fit more into that. So something like that would be cool too. Yeah, you're
right, man. I never thought about like the urban ranger. Like that's actually a really cool concept. Especially if you have like a gigantic city, like a King's Landing type city, where it's like you can like it takes like a day and a half or 2 days to like walk across the entire city. So just like a massive city. You need somebody that knows all the like nooks and crannies and stuff.
Right.
That's actually a super cool setup.
Cool. Yeah. So where would you guys put playing ranger on your list? So if your number one was I'm probably going to play a paladin every time and Luka, yours was wizard, where among the how many classes are there? But yeah, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Rank it on the list.
I'd probably place it before fighter. I'd probably say even like number 2.
Oh
wow. Okay. So why haven't you played one yet?
I don't know.
Yeah. Sweet. Good answer. What about you, Luka?
I was gonna say the opposite. Like, if not last, then like second last.
I think I'm there as well. Again, like I was saying before, I just think everything you could do with a ranger, you could do with a fighter.
Yeah, like even the backstory I just thought of with like socially unskilled, like raised in the wild, like you could just do that with a fighter.
Yeah,
like I'm a fighter that learned nature skills by living in nature.
Now I still have an additional action. I didn't have to sacrifice my action for my backstory. Yeah. Where would fighter fall on you guys' list?
Probably right after.
And then barbarian. You are so white bread, man. Absolute fucking normie. I'm gonna play paladin or a ranger or a fighter. Human.
For me, it'd be higher up. Like, obviously, wizard, sorcerer would be like number 1. I'd honestly, I think I'd rather play a fighter than a warlock. And then like fighter over rogue for sure. I don't know, between monk and fighter, that'd be like a tough decision for me. But fighter would be like top 4, maybe top 5.
I would say it's probably my top 3. Obviously played a fighter before. It's super fun. But there are sort of instances where you're like, man, I wish I had spells. But I think, well, I mean, we'll get into warlock when we get to warlock, but so I think it fell in top 3 for all of us then. So
I think for fighter, like your sort of role playing, like your character story is what would have to be much more like complicated to hold you through those times. You're like, oh, I wish I had like some spells or something else to do. Like your sort of like your character's development would be what's the most interesting.
That's a really good point, actually, because like I said before, I think fighter's a good um, baby's first D&D character type of
Yeah.
thing. But because of that reason, where the the history or backstory of a fighter is not innately built into the class the same way some of the other classes are,
Mhm.
I think you really have to get a player who's like, yeah, I want to be like I have an idea and I want to play it through. Because
Yeah.
if you just show up and like, yeah, you used to be a soldier, like how boring is that? Like, you
Mhm.
know, that's for me, that's a way for the player to be like, yeah, I'm a guy who swings a sword and like not get any deeper than that type of thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. For Ranger, um, I think there's more of that flavor built in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some like characteristics that are just like naturally there as soon as you pick Ranger. Like the fact that you can have animal companion, like you're almost forced to like somehow add that into your backstory.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if we'll see any fighters or rangers in our game that we're going to play, because they ended, well, maybe for you and I, Luca, because we had them pretty low. But Will, I think uh I'll just say it, you can't play paladin, fighter, or ranger in this upcoming game, or cleric, because you've done that before. Yeah, those will be off limits for you. Yeah, you're gonna be a gnome bard, you little fuck. Um,
No, no,
no,
you guys. I really hate mage. I cannot
Oh
stand
my.
mage.
oh
Whoa.
man, I say I like fighter? I meant something else. I hate playing fighters. Holy, oh, boring. Oh, what do you have? Everything you want?
Too
Oh, that
wide.
sucks.
Fuck fighters.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is shaping up to be interesting though. This is like begrudgingly playing D&D.
Yeah.
I almost feel bad for our excellent DM. But yeah, I think that'll do it for our conversation on Rangers and Fighters. Again, check out Ruminations that came out last Friday. Get prepared for us playing D&D. That'll be fun. And also check out Unabashed coming out this coming Friday when you're seeing this. I think we'll have on, well, I won't say in case I'm wrong. But yeah, look out for that. And as always, I'm Matt.
I'm Luca.
And I'm Will.
And we are the Lords of Lore.